but let's go ahead and get started this morning. So good morning. My name's Pam Tipton. I'm Senior Director of Custom Programs for Emory Executive Education at Goizueta Business School. And I'm joined today by my teammates, Heather Dufault and Jennifer Eames. So you'll be hearing from them throughout the webinar in chat and in our closing. So welcome to Business Over Breakfast. We are really honored that you have chosen to invest your time with us this morning. And for those that might be first-time visitors, a special welcome to you. So from time to time, we like to feature content in our webinar series that is more individualized, career-focused topics. And today's topic is on personal board of directors and our August 1st webinar on focusing on taking advantage of those kind of in-between stages in your career. Both of these sessions are what I like to say are somewhat of an amuse-bouche or a small taste of what's in store for the participants in our upcoming Executive Women's Leadership Program that kicks off in September. Heather will be sharing a little bit more about that program later in today's session. So why are we including a session on creating a personal board of directors? I'm sure you can relate that too often it feels like that the pressures of leading in business today can really completely overwhelm achieving your deeper goals or staying aligned with your values and life priorities. And a personal board composed of people that you respect can really help hold you accountable and help you find creative alternatives and solutions to life's challenges. It's a terrific place to turn to for advice when you're trying to manage through a crisis or even life transitions, some difficult choices, or even ethical dilemmas. So chosen well, these are people who embody the core values and standards that you aspire to live up to day to day. We are super excited to welcome back to Business Over Breakfast, Donna Peters. Donna is a highly sought after career and executive coach. She's the author of 4-time award-winning international bestseller, Options Are Power. And over the last 5 years, Donna has served as an affiliate faculty member here at Goizueta for both our executive MBA programs as well as our executive education programs. And she is the founder and CEO of the Me Suite. We're especially proud that she's an alumna of our executive coaching diploma program. Prior to coaching, Donna spent a number of years in consulting. She was a senior partner at Accenture, advising her consulting clients and leading cross-industry practices around the globe for more than 20 years. And her mantra has been, put work to work for you. So after today's webinar, I am certain you're going to want to check out her podcast. It's among one of the most downloaded, and I'm certain that you will find really insightful nuggets there that will help you in your own journey. So as with all of our webinars, Donna's going to spend about the next 25 or 30 minutes sharing her practical and actionable insights. And throughout the session, she invites you to post your questions to the Q&A box or the chat. It is a little easier for us to manage when they're posted in the Q&A box, but feel free to use that chat. We have reserved some time at the end to respond to questions. We'll try to get to as many as possible. If you are seeking to elevate your own personal brand, we invite you to check out our lineup of courses that are coming this fall, and especially consider nominating someone or attending our Executive Women's Leadership Program featuring Donna as one of our faculty guides. So we'll post that information into the chat and share more later on in our webinar. But for now, I'm excited to welcome Donna to the mic. And Donna, thanks so much for spending your time with us and sharing your insights. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Pam, for that generous introduction, and also the gorgeous tee up of personal brand of the personal board of directors. It was a gorgeous tee up of why it's important to think about: do I want one? Do I need one? How would I use one? And if I already have one, does it maybe need some refreshing or tweaking? So thank you for the tee up of personal board of directors. So I want to set a little bit of context. The name of my business is the Me Suite. That's my executive and career coaching practice. And the Me Suite was built upon the principle that we should be leading our own personal lives with the same mindsets and disciplines that C-suites lead the companies that we most admire. And in 2020 and in 2021, I did research with over 500 leaders about what are the core business practices that have relevance to the way that we would lead our own personal lives to shape the future that we want to live in and shape the role that work plays in our lives. Hence what Pam so perfectly said, putting work to work for us. And there were top 3 topics. One of them was personal branding, which Pam, you also just mentioned. The second one was establishing a personal board of directors. And the third one was personal strategic planning. So strategic planning, board of directors, personal branding, or just branding are 3 things that were the top disciplines that we execute so wonderfully and thoughtfully and intentionally in our corporate lives as leaders in the work that we do. And what if we could raise our own game on our own personal goals and objectives by applying those principles to leading our own personal lives like a C-suite, hence the me suite. And so that's one reason I'm so passionate about the topic of personal board of directors, because we know that it brings tremendous benefits to corporations. This could be for profit, not for profit, doesn't matter. It's just an entity, an organization. And we know that there's a huge what if, the art of the possible, if we applied those disciplines to ourselves. So that's where we're headed. And I hope you think you're in the right meeting. So I'm going to start to share my screen. If you can give me just one moment. All right. And I'm going to blow it up. And Heather or someone from the team, if you could just come off mute and let me know that you can see it correctly.
We can see it.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. So 2 things we're going to talk about under the umbrella of personal board of directors: why you need one and how to build it. So I'm going to talk a little bit up front about the context of the concept. And I know everyone out there, I know you're really, really smart people and you're going to catch on to this extremely quickly. And you also have your own experiences in the companies or organizations that you've been a part of, either as a former employee, former formal employee, maybe where you might volunteer in a not-for-profit organization. Some of you may even sit on boards, corporate or not-for-profit. I know that you intellectually know the concept of board of directors. I'm going to talk a little bit about what does a board of directors do when we talk about it in a corporate or not-for-profit context, so that we then can pull the thread to what if we do it for me. If I turn the mirror on myself, what would it look like to take that knowledge that we have externally of boards and put that mirror on ourselves? That's more of the context and the concept, but then we need to spend time on, well, so what am I going to do about it? What could I do differently tomorrow if I got motivated to put attention against my own board? And that'll be the how to build it. So let me start with what does the corporate board even do? And again, I know have had exposure to this concept. What does a corporate board do? Now, I'm loosely using the word corporate here, which we often will affiliate with a public company or a larger organization that's a for-profit organization. This also applies to not-for-profit. Not-for-profits also have boards. Your not-for-profit that might be the Puppet Theater in Atlanta, or the not-for-profit that actually operates like an enormous organization like the Bill Gates Foundation. All of those organizations have boards. I'm loosely calling them all corporate boards here, just for ease of speech, but I think you'll understand I'm using it in multiple contexts. We know that corporate boards have been a concept since as early as the 12th century. They really started to take on a life around medieval Europe when merchant trading, merchant commerce was booming. We also know that around the 17th century, this concept around the Industrial Revolution was really taking on as there was more international trade and corporations were growing and growing, and the governance was increasing in complexity. And we also know in our more recent history and around the 19th century, there were even boards when the railroads were booming, because that allowed trade to increase. It allowed companies to grow and get bigger. But more importantly, it increased complexity and opened up a whole sea of unknowns. And so many of these things are happening to us as individuals, as people. We have a vision of where we may want to go, but there's a lot of unknowns out there about how to get there and how to marshal how to get there to achieve that goal. And so just as these organizations over hundreds and hundreds of years have recognized Wouldn't I be more powerful and productive and successful if I surrounded myself with a board? What if I did that for myself personally? So if you could go into the chat for a moment and just type to me, what does a corporate board do? What have you seen a corporate board do in your own experiences? Maybe you've even been sitting on boards. Maybe you've experienced it in the company that you work for. Maybe you've read about it. If you could just go on chat, and I'm going to try to read a few of these. Manage the direction of the company, set the strategy, make decisions on how to spend the money, strategic planning, capital improvements, review the financials, strategize. All of these are magic words. And can you see already how reviewing the financials, strategizing about the future direction, can you already see how that applies to you as a person? This is not just relevant to a company as an entity. All right, so let's get into the meat. Here is a classic definition of a board of directors. And this is more for the corporate. It could also be not-for-profit, as I mentioned, board of directors. Their purpose in life, the reason they are assembled, is to provide knowledge, skills, and economic understanding. So they bring a perspective maybe outside the industry. You can imagine how over the last year, how many companies have been looking for board members that can bring generative AI experience. That's an example of a company going, holy smokes, my future is being impacted by something I don't know anything about. I need to surround myself with experts. I'm going to start to appoint board members who have generative AI experience. That's an example of this provides knowledge, skills, and economic understanding. A board of directors also monitors the key business activities and performance. Many of you mentioned the financials, the strategic direction, the vision, monitoring those key business activities and performance to make sure that the company is oriented on the right things and has a prayer of achieving them. And then the third one is they challenge as advisors, and there's a magic word here, independent advisors. Often corporate board members are compensated in some way. They may be compensated in a cash way. They may be compensated with stock. They are often compensated. However, they have a fiduciary independent responsibility to advise in the best interest of the company. And if it's a public company, advise in an independent manner that's in the best interest of the shareholders. Now, for those of you who have not-for-profit board experience, these things are all still true. Provide knowledge, skills, and economic understanding, monitor key business activities and performance, challenge as an advisor. What is often different is you are not compensated. That's often the only difference. You are not compensated. So you all intellectually understand what is a board of directors. You've been living in this environment. You might have been one yourself, but now let's turn the mirror on ourselves. If we look at a proper corporate board, there are many ways a board is comprised. And it's usually a very strategic decision to think about the different ways we invite people to the board for a very particular reason to achieve a very specific goal. These people here you see on my slide, they're a little bit grayed out. This is a real corporate board from a real company. This is information directly from their website. And I wanted to share with you a little bit about how they comprised their board so that you could think about, well, what if I did that for myself right now, today, tomorrow? What would my picture of my board look like? This particular company is in the healthcare monitoring and testing space. And they have, on my left-hand side, they have appointed board members who have CEO positions at other companies, CFO, Chief Commercial Officer, EVP, SVP. One of them is even a major general retired from the military. On the right-hand side, these people also come from industries of life sciences, healthcare, food, industrial, hospitality. So clearly this business has decided, because they are more in this monitoring and testing space, and while they may appear to only be in this healthcare arena, they're recognizing for their growth, we need to understand trends and implications from healthcare, food, industrial, hospitality, because analogs and experiences from those industries are directly relevant to where we want to go as a company. So you see a mix of levels of titles of leadership roles on the left. You see a mix of industry representation on the right. And at the bottom, you see a mix of functional expertise. Of these people, how many are there? I have 5, 10, 13. Of these 13 people, some represent merger and acquisition experience, HR, cybersecurity, treasury, ops, global, around the world experience, and technology. Now, I do not suggest that you have a board of 13 people. We'll talk about numbers of people in a moment for our personal board. But what I want you to take away from this is, if a company is looking at assembling a board and they're looking at different functional leadership experiences, different industry relevance to bring in, that's not directly relevant to what I do today, but might be analogous to what I want to be doing tomorrow. These are the ways we use a board of directors to bring knowledge, skills, and understanding, to challenge us as advisors, and to help monitor the day-to-day activities that we've committed to achieving. And I personally find it's always really helpful to go out and look at other examples for advice and fuel for my ideas, and then turn that mirror back on myself and say, what would be relevant for me? And that's where we are going. We also find in this mix of 13 real board members at a real company, there is a variety, a diversity of ages, tenure, and thought. And so that would be another challenge I would give to you as you're thinking about your own board of directors. We usually think of board of directors as older, more seasoned people. I personally have a 26-year-old on my board of directors, because the more I have grown in my career, the more out of touch I have become with the newer generation entering the workforce. And so I personally have a younger, early career talent on my board to help me stay fresh and relevant to that group of talent in the workplace. So ages, tenure, diversity of thought. A typical board will have committees, as many of you have seen. You might have even sat on some of these committees. A typical board has committees of the following. If you look around my blue table here, I'll start at 9 o'clock. There's an audit and compliance committee, compensation and talent, finance, safety, health and environment, and governance. These are very typical committees that you will see on almost every board, whether it's for-profit or not for profit. And this board is in service of the CEO and the business priorities. We often think of the CEO as the one with the biggest power, but for any of you that are coming from publicly traded or for-profit organizations, you'll all know the CEO reports to the board. And often I think we diminish just how powerful and influential a board is, because we just typically think of the CEO as the top, when the CEO actually reports to the board. So this is the typical board committees that help advise the CEO and advise the business priorities. So how can a board benefit an individual? We're now turning the mirror on ourselves, as I promised, to talk about, why would I benefit from my own personal board of directors? And if I decide to give it a try, how would I build it? So if you could go into the chat for me for a moment. I would love if you're already seeing some connections of how might an individual benefit from a board. What might a board be brought together to help marshal for an individual? Sponsorship, advice, guidance, sounding board, honest feedback. Ooh, honest. That's going to be important here in a moment. Objective, also very important. Mentorship, connections, new direction thinking. Improve personal branding, constructive feedback, enlarge perspective, finding blind spots. Okay, Chantal, we're going to talk about blind spots in a second too. I love this. Reality check, awesome. Test ideas, so important. I would love it, Goizueta Executive Education Committee, if we could keep this chat.
We'll do
Do we
it.
have a way to save this chat? Okay, awesome. I would love to be able to have a running list and document all of these things, and maybe even use it in a different session or make it available to all of you. These are all wonderful fodder for if I want to be building or refreshing my own personal board of directors, what might I deploy them in service of? And this is a beautiful list that you've been generating here. So thank you. Okay. Changing a slide here. So, deja vu. This is almost the identical slide I shared a few moments ago with what is a board of directors for a company. What does it do? Why do you have one? The one for a personal board looks almost identical, provides knowledge, skills, and understanding, monitors key activities and performance, and challenges as an advisor, which you just all were running through that list in the chat for me. But this is the simple single page. If you were to assemble a personal board of directors and you were to say, what is the purpose of my board? This would be the primary purpose of the board. So on the surface, this looks very easy. Sorry, it looks very simple, but it isn't easy, because the tricky part is we have to focus the board of directors on something meaningful, a goal or goals that you personally want to progress, because the board needs a purpose. With a company, the CEO and the business priorities, the purpose is pretty clear. For us personally, where I find us struggle the most, myself included, is I know intellectually that the concept of a board is interesting, could be valuable, but I have to do the hard work of deciding what do I focus the board behind. So let's talk about that for a moment. A great place to start is the 6 dimensions that determine the quality of our lives. From the social sciences, we know from research and analysis and pundits, you can really break down the quality of our lives in 6 dimensions. And I would argue just about anything you can imagine that impacts the quality of your life can be found in one of these 6 dimensions. Again, I'm going to start at 9 o'clock. There's career and the role that work plays in our lives, the work that we're doing, the way we give and receive meaning in work. There's personal growth. For some of us, that might be learning another language. It might be international travel. It might be advancing my prowess at playing the cello. Personal growth. Finances, pretty self-explanatory. This doesn't mean go make as much money as you possibly can and sell your soul to the devil. It means, what role do I need money to play in my life, and what is needed for me to live the life that I want to live. At 3 o'clock is physical and mental health. Spirituality, this could be in a more formal religion context for some people. It could be more around mindfulness, in meditation, and sense of purpose. And then family and relationships. If you start with these 6 dimensions, this is a great place to start, almost like a prompt for you to decide where in the quality of life would I want to be making a change or achieving a new goal. And would it be helpful if I put a board of directors behind that goal or those goals? And this may change every 3 months, like a C-suite team revisits the strategic plan every quarter. You might revisit this every quarter. But my challenge to you is you got to start somewhere. If the goals aren't quite clear, or you're not quite clear where a board would be most helpful, this is a perfect place to start to ask yourself the questions of, what would I be most proud to have progressed, let's say in the next 6 months, if I put some earnest effort against defining a goal and achieving or progressing a goal. And sometimes defining a goal can be the goal. Okay. How to build it. So I talked a little bit about, we wanted to start with context and the concept of what is a board and how might we turn that mirror on ourselves. But let's get practical. At the end of the day, I'm a very practical person. We need to have enough direction to know, if I wanted to try something, how would I try it tomorrow, and not just talk about it. And here's a couple of really practical examples of how to build your board. I'm going to start at, what would this be, about 11 o'clock, and I'm going to go clockwise around. The first thing we have to do is define your scope. What priorities do you want the board members to help you direct? And this one is so important, because this is what differentiates a board of directors from simply having a mentor. A mentor is a very important relationship in our lives. Sometimes your mentors can be on your board, but a mentorship compared to a board is a much more informal interaction, informal relationship. The priorities that you want to align your board member around have to be specific, they have to be focused, and they need a time frame of a beginning, middle, and an end of the effort that you're going to put against it to progress the goal or the goals. So defining your scope here is really important. And if you talk about the 6 dimensions that determine the quality of our lives, you may just take one of them. It may just be one of those dimensions that you want to progress with a board. It might be around financial acumen or financial discipline. It might be around a career goal that you have for promotion. For some of you, you may pick 1 or 2 from those 6, depending on where you are and what's most important. But focus and specificity and guardrails, a timeline, a beginning, middle, and end is really important to not just progress your goal, but to respect the relationship that you are engaging in a formal way with a board of directors. Over at about 2 o'clock, fill your blind spots. When you start to think about a board, think about ways that there are people who can bring what you need, that complement you, and that will challenge you. Many of you had in your chat for me honest feedback, constructive feedback. It's really important that we think about requesting people join our board that we know will have our best interests in mind, and we know that they will feel confident and comfortable and not just telling us what we want to hear. And that's why I showed that mix of the corporate board, that real corporate board. It had a mix of functional expertise. It had a mix of age and tenure and areas of experience. It's really important that your board bring those different dimensions to challenge your thinking. And for you as an individual, I would recommend targeting about 3 to 5 people to be on your board. First of all, it's manageable. And second of all, I seriously doubt you need 13 people like a corporate board might need. And 3 to 5, if you've never managed a personal board before, is it's super manageable, number one. So if you've never tried it before, you'll have a greater chance of success in managing a board of about 3 to 5 people. And we also know whenever you go out and do a survey, so if any of you have ever done an anonymous 360 survey at work, or maybe you've gone out and you've gotten just a regular feedback survey, we know from the survey statistical methodologies, we never report out results from a demographic in a survey if that demographic did not have more than 3 responders in it. Because if you just had a onesie or a twosie answer, you really can't run off and make a change based on what one person said. So a 3 to 5 person board also gives you a little bit of variety in answers, but also a little bit of commonality so you can look for themes and not everything's an outlier, if that makes sense. We'll have time for Q&A and I can explore that one a little more if you want to learn a little bit more about that. At around 5 o'clock, don't get bored with your board. We need to reassess, do we have the right members? We need to appreciate the ones that we invited who helped us complete a task, complete a goal, and we need to refresh it at times. And that's why it's so important to establish an end date with this relationship, with this particular board assembled for this particular goal with a beginning, middle, and an end. And again, this is why it's different from mentorship. This is more formal and more focused. And it also allows us to say, I had a goal around my physical and mental health for the first half of the year. I've progressed it with this board. I've made meaningful progress. This isn't the board I need anymore. I might need a different type of a board. So establishing an end date can really help because everybody has the expectation of the time frame, and it makes it much easier for you to uninvite people when you don't need them anymore. And it doesn't look like you're divorcing someone. So over at about 7 o'clock, set and keep commitments. When you first go out and invite that board member to join you, we have to be extremely clear and respectful. And again, this is more to the formality component. What is the time frame, the format in which we're going to meet, and the engagement expectations for what I want from you as one of my personal board members. Be really clear on whether you want them to meet as a group or as one-on-one, and also confirm that there is no compensation in this particular board. And the tip here is to honor your commitments. I don't know if you've ever been asked to be on a personal board, or maybe you've been asked to be a mentor for someone. But when they don't follow through, you start to wonder, well, wait a minute, was my advice not helpful? Why haven't I heard from that person? And you can actually erode a relationship if you go out and ask for something and they commit to doing it, and then you don't follow through with the courtesy of the commitment and the rhythm and just the respect and the follow through. So be really careful about setting and keeping commitments. I think it's one of the most important components of building a personal board. And I think one of the areas where we fall short is in the follow through. And again, this is why a personal board is different from just sponsorship and mentorship, because it has more formality around the engagement. I want to say one thing about, do you meet as a group or as a one-on-one? I get this question a lot, and maybe some of you have it too. It is absolutely best practice 12 out of 10. If you can structure your personal board where they actually come together as a group and align around a particular goal that you're pursuing. If you have a side hustle and you want to launch it into a full-fledged business, you might put a board together to help you scale that business idea. If you have a vision that in the next 10 years you want to be in a CEO position, you might assemble a personal board to help you progress and make decisions about the career hops and experiences you want to curate on your path to CEO. And they may come together and sit around a table. Maybe it's a virtual Zoom table, but they maybe sit around a table with you and advise as a group. That's a 12 out of 10 if you're able to organize your personal board in that way around a common goal that they can all equally debate and advise on. At the same time, it is more common to have a personal board just be one-on-one interactions, where I may have 3 or 5 people on my board, but they don't come together as an entity. It's just I reach out to them and set my rhythm with them one-on-one, and we check in on my goals. And that approach works better if you're working on goals in different spaces. So you might have someone on your board who is helping you manage more of the work-life balance type topics or goals that you have. You might have another person on your board that has industry expertise that you're particularly wanting. Maybe you've joined a new industry that you don't know much about, and you want someone on your board to shore you up there. And in those relationships, based on those goals, one-on-one may be more appropriate because the other members of your board just aren't relevant to the space. So it's going to be an it depends answer. And I was a management consultant for 20 years, and you can imagine how many times I said it depends. But it really does depend. And it depends on your goal. And that's where the simple but not easy work comes in, of getting really clear on what is the goal that you want to orient a board around, and then let that influence the types of board members that you need to be inviting for this prescribed period of time. Pam, I saw you come off a video. Did you have a question?
Yes, we've got something
Okay.
I think is relevant to what you're
Okay,
talking
let's go.
about right now. But Donna, I have to read you one of the comments in the chat.
Okay.
Bryant said, these webinars always make me wish it was Monday. Always so motivating. So I love that.
Hey, that's a hot tip.
Wanted to share that. So, okay, I've got a two-part question. So I'm combining two questions because I think it's relevant to answer both of those at the same time. But the first one was, how do you recommend asking someone to be on your board? And then, how do I know if there's a fit between board members and myself? I felt like those two things together were kind of important to ask at the same time.
Yeah, they are wonderful. They are wonderful. Can you see my morning sun coming in? It's the positive is to say it makes me look angelic, but actually I think it's just too bright. So anyway, so I've got some sun coming in. I hope you can see me okay. Can you see me all right?
Yes.
Okay. Great questions. And thank you for teeing this up. I'm actually going to skip a slide to answer one of those questions. How to invite a board member. So thank you for the tee up. Two things I want you to think about in how you invite a board member to be on your board. I'm going to start on the left-hand side. The first is you have to know your goal, or there could be more than one goal. So I've put an S here in parentheses. You have to know your goal, and this is back to focus and specificity and a time frame. In order for you to truly get value from a personal board of directors member, and for that member to also feel valued, and these things are equally important, you have to know your goal to align them behind it, to specify this is why I need your help, to state what help you need to meet the goal, and then be clear on why you want that particular person to help. So what I typically do is everybody's a little different and it might depend on your relationship with the person, but here's some examples. I typically would write a more formal email that articulates my goal, states why I need their help, and it basically compliments the person on why I need their help in particular, based on my knowledge of them, their reputation, their expertise, their personal style, how much they motivate me, encourage me, whatever that complimentary reason is of why that person and not someone else. And I usually put that in an email, and I specify down on the right-hand side, I specify the time commitment that I think that this will take. Are we going to meet 1 hour every month for 3 months? Or are we going to meet 30 minutes every 2 weeks for 6 months? I set up that expectation of what I think I need. I clarify if it's in person or on video, as we always do in our work environments too. And I also give them a graceful exit. Allow the person to say no in a way that they do not feel they're letting you down. Because we're not trying to put somebody on the spot. We're not trying to make somebody feel bad. And if they truly can't give you the time you need right now, you don't want them on your board anyway. So I usually do this first as a formal email. And if it's a person that I know well enough that I would have their cell phone, I also would put in that email that I'm also going to be texting you to see if we can chat. Or I might include my calendar link and say, hey, can we get on the phone for 30 minutes and discuss further? So it sounds really tactical in a way to be telling you, oh, send this email and then send that text. But the strategic part of it is the way you approach is clarity on your goal, what you need help with to get that goal and why it's important to you. And then that little complimentary piece of there's 20,000 people I could have asked, but I chose you for this reason. And the graceful exit. The graceful exit is so important to just maintaining the relationship, being courteous that you are asking for a pretty heavy lift, and also recognizing this may just not be the right time to give you what you need. Now, Pam, you had a two-part question though. One was, how do you invite the person? The second one?
Yeah, the second part of the question was, how do I know if there is a fit between board members and myself?
Yeah. Okay. So I want you all to think about, remember I started with, there's so many beautiful work experiences that we have had in our corporate or not-for-profit lives as career professionals that have application to what we do personally. And this is another example. If you have ever hired a person to join a company, or you've ever interviewed somebody to make an internal transfer from team A to your team, if you have ever done that, you have done what Pam just described. You have met someone for the first time. You've learned a little bit more about them. You have understood what they're about, maybe what they value, their personality style you may have assessed. And in all of that interaction, you are assessing, are they going to get along with the people who are already on your team? You've probably already done that in your work life. And it's very similar as you select a personal board of directors. If you're deciding that you want to operate them as a board that comes together and where their styles complement each other, you use the information that you have to inform that decision, just as you do at work when you interview someone for a role. You are looking, do we have shared values? You're looking at personality styles. You are looking at whether or not that person you believe is going to have your best interests in mind. If you can believe that the individual board members are there because they have your best interest in mind, you are probably 80% there of knowing that when they are together, it's going to be a healthy environment. So, beyond a crystal ball, that's about all we have. But I will tell you, you probably already have more of this intuition in your DNA from your own work experiences, and now just apply it to yourself.
And Donna, before you move
Yep.
on, there's a couple of more questions that have come in relative to
Great.
selecting and inviting your board, so to speak.
Perfect.
And so Giovanni asked,
Okay.
can family be or should family be a part of the board? And I'll pair that with, or perhaps a significant other. Should they be
Yes.
part of your
Oh,
board?
thank you for asking this question. It's extremely important. And I promise you, probably everyone on this call is thinking of this very question. So thank you for asking it. Yes, you can absolutely have a family member on your personal board of directors. Um, if you do choose to have a board member, a family member, or even a really, really close dear friend on your personal board, just recognize where the feedback is coming from. It's feedback that's very important to you, right? Of course, that's why you would be inviting them. But remember that they have a role, and their role is to bring knowledge and skills and understanding, to be a challenging advisor, and to monitor whether or not the activities and your performance are going in the grain of the goal that you have for yourself. They have the same remit that the other board members have. This one's just a trickier area because they may, if they're truly having your best interest in mind, they may sometimes be saying things that you don't want to hear. So just remember, this is a more formal arrangement that comes with some instructions. And if you do choose to bring a family member on, I would highly encourage you to keep the formality that there's a structured one-on-one conversation or a structured meeting that's coming together with the board members. And that is the space in which you have the conversation. That is the environment in which the feedback is given. It isn't over dinner when the kids are screaming for because they're hungry. That's not when your family board member is allowed to give you personal board of directors advice. So just remember the formality and remember the remit. And as long as both parties are in agreement of that setting expectations, it can be wonderful and so rewarding to have a family member be a part of your goal. Does that help?
Yes, thanks, Donna.
Okay.
And then another question has come in about from April. How do you handle
Mm-hmm.
situations where your members are in conflict with one another regarding advice that they're giving you? How might you navigate that?
Yeah,
Especially if you're,
bringing them.
yeah, bringing them together, or
Yeah.
maybe even not bringing them together so that each one isn't hearing the other's input.
Yeah, that is an interesting question. In a corporate setting, we have the benefit of often having a corporate board facilitator, right? So in a corporate board or a not-for-profit board, there is often a person who is facilitating the board from a governance perspective to help handle that weirdness when person A is having a personal attack on person B because they disagree fundamentally about a topic. In a personal board, you're not going to have the privilege of that independent facilitator. I do find, though, in a personal board of directors, it will be extremely unusual for your board members to go for each other's throats because that's not why they're there. They're there for you, right? They're there for you. And so I think 99% of the time, this is not going to be an issue. If you do find it to be an issue, and I love that you're thinking ahead because I think it's really important to think ahead about things like this, especially if you know you're picking two board members that may not get along, is to set an expectation with the group about how we're going to disagree. And again, lean on your corporate experience. You have work experience, most likely, or even educational experience from being on teams in school. You have experience being with groups where people disagree. And we often set guidelines, guiding principles before a meeting of how are we going to disagree. And that could be part of the way of working of your board if you know that you are going to have some heated debates or particularly electrically charged personalities. Does that
Well, and
help?
Amy came with a follow-up about,
Okay.
so they do offer pretty diverse opinions. And,
Yeah.
I'm going to take some liberties here, but
Okay. Yeah.
one is advising you to take this
Mhm.
path and the other is advising you to take this path. And it
Yeah.
seems to me part of that is your own gut intuition or maybe the experiences of your board. Like, how might you navigate that
Yeah.
situation while not destroying the
Yeah.
trust between yourself and your board member whose, advice you didn't take?
Okay. Love it. Thank you for that one, Amy. A couple of things. Number one, any work that you launch into for yourself, I always advise that you start with your personal core values. So if you haven't, if I meet you at a party and I ask you your core values and you cannot immediately answer those for me, please go do that work. Please go do that work. You need to be intimate and self-aware of your own personal core values, because those will be the filters that you use when you've got two different personal board members giving you completely different advice and you're not quite sure what to listen to. You go anchor back to your core values to filter that advice. At the same time, we always say thank you for those differing opinions, because even an opinion we don't agree with can make us think differently. So rather than think of person A gave me advice and I'm going to decline it, oh my gosh, they're going to be upset I'm declining it. No, you're not declining it. It's thank you for helping me think differently than I did yesterday. But because now I have your input, I am actually thinking differently than I did yesterday. And the third thing to think about is if it's a really important decision and you're really seeing polar divides in the advice, that could be an indication that you need to go share that uh, dilemma with other people and get more advice on the topic. That actually could be an indication you're not ready to make the decision, and that these two polar debates, it's not enough to help you. And that might be a reason to expand your board a little bit. It might be a reason to go do some informational chats with people. So maybe I hope those three scenarios maybe help a little bit.
Great, thank you. And Donna, Roxanne has asked, oh, I
Uh-huh.
just covered up my chat.
Okay.
How do you make the board member relationship valuable for them so it isn't just
Uh,
one way? You're
uh,
asking someone who may be really busy and
yeah.
you want to feel worth their time as well.
Okay, wonderful. So a couple of things to think about on that one. I'm going to go back to some social science research. Whenever we are hesitant to ask someone for help, which is all of us, right? We're like, oh, they're too busy, or they don't want to go work on my little problem, or I don't want to interrupt you. This probably isn't a good time for you. That's one reason we provide the graceful exit, number one. But from the social science research, we know a couple of things. We know that people want to help people. We know that the brain is activated with positive hormones when people come and ask us for help. It is actually called the helper's high. We as an individual receive physically in our bodies, we receive the physical response that's pleasant and positive and rewarding when people come and ask for our help. So if any of you were thinking, oh, they're too busy, they don't want to work on my little problem, this probably isn't a good time, they're just going to be flattered that you asked. And we know that scientifically, not just theoretically, because of the changes that happen in the body when we are perceived as helpful to other people. And if you're providing them also with a graceful exit, then the likelihood that you are burdening them is lower. They get the benefit of being invited, and it feels good. It feels good when people come and ask for your advice. It feels good. So number one, it's going to feel good. And then if you give them the graceful exit, the likelihood that they attach themselves to a commitment that's a burden is much lower. The second thing that we know, and this is fascinating to me, when you go out and ask someone for help, you actually get intelligence points, competency points. We are perceived as more competent when we go out and ask for help. So it's another reason to feel even more confident about going out and assembling a personal board. You're actually perceived as more competent when you do that. And again, as long as you're providing people with a graceful exit, the likelihood that they are going to attach themselves to a burden that they cannot complete is minimized. And if you're asking for a longer commitment, like a year or 8 months or something, it could be really wise to have a checkpoint about halfway in with your board members, just to make sure there aren't other extenuating circumstances that have happened in their lives that may make them need to slow down with you or exit the board. And that would be a very fair adult conversation. Again, we've probably had experiences with these types of conversations with our work colleagues. You probably have that skill in your DNA that you have done at work already, and now just apply it to yourself. Okay.
Great. Thank you, Donna.
Okay.
We've had an attendee ask, have you
Mm-hmm.
experienced individuals you've coached wanting
Mm-hmm.
to compensate or incentivize a personal board of 3 to 5 members? If so, how do you address that with them?
So they have asked, the board member has asked for compensation. Is that
Um,
does
It
it
said
say?
the way the question reads, it
Uh-huh.
sounds like that the individual has wanted to incentivize board members, is the way I'm
Yeah.
understanding. And if you've asked that question and would like to clarify, please just message the host and panelists. That'd be great. But that's how I
Okay.
read the question. Have you
Okay. And I
experienced
can answer it
individuals
both
you've
ways.
coached?
Yeah, I can answer it both ways.
Sure.
Let's assume for a moment it's the person who wants a board and they want to compensate the board. Okay. If you want to compensate your board in some way, you might want to do it with in-kind services, right? So maybe you own a business and your compensation is you're going to give this thing to the board member for free because you own a business, and so therefore I'm going to give you free golf lessons or free coaching sessions, or this lifetime supply of my non-GMO shampoo, whatever your business is. You may want to compensate them. If you are wanting to offer the compensation, my only request is please have a contract. Have a contract. So rather than this just be an email that says, will you join my board and let's work together for the next 6 months, let it be contractual, where you have in writing, this is the board expectation that you're signing up for, and I am providing this compensation to you for that time. So really think about doing something more formal around that, because there's an exchange of goods and services. If it's the board member asking you if you compensate, typically this is not a compensation environment unless you're actually assembling a board for a startup, and that would be more of a company board than a personal board. If you're starting a business and you want this board to be about your business, very, very common in that world, in that VC private equity land, to give stock options as a compensation, for example. That's very common. Again, it would require a contract, but that's more of a company board. If you're actually starting a business and want the board members to focus on the business, but 99% of the time, the answer is this is not a compensated position, and that would be in your original email to them. That's in your original email. And so what you're leaning on when somebody asks that very smart question about what's in it for them, what you're leaning on is the kindness and generosity of the universe, that people want to be helpful to other people, and we know that is true scientifically. And as long as you're building an environment where you're paying it back as well and being a personal board member to other people, this is almost like the universe feeding itself. So this is typically non-compensated, I think, is the shortest answer.
Right. Thank
Yeah.
you, Donna. We've got time for kind of
Yeah.
about 1.5 more questions, if you
Okay.
will. So I'm
Can
going
I show
to
one thing too? I want to show one thing that people will get in case we run out of time.
absolutely.
This is the slide I skipped. It's a simple worksheet that is in the materials that'll be available to everybody. Again, it's simple, not easy. It just simply summarizes the 6 dimensions that determine the quality of our lives, and how you might think about assembling a board to help you with goals that you may have specific to any of those areas. This doesn't mean overwhelm yourself and have 5 board members for all 6 items and have 30 people. That's not what I mean. What I mean is use it as a checkpoint for yourself to decide, where would it be most meaningful for me to progress a goal with help? And maybe that is the focus and the specificity and the time frame that I put board members against. So sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Pam. I just want to make sure people knew that
I
was
am
in
so
here.
glad that you shared that, and let's leave that up while I ask you this last
Okay.
question, if you will.
You got it.
So you
You got
may
it.
have touched on this, but I thought it was an important question that came to us. How long should
Uh,
you ask a board member to serve when you're making
okay,
that initial ask?
perfect.
And then a second part, different question, but should you change your board as your goals change?
Okay, so let me take the second one first. Please change your board as your goals change. And so, just like a C-suite has a strategic plan and they revisit it quarterly, it's really smart to do the same thing for yourself and your own personal goals. And quarterly, as you check in on your own professional and personal goals, if those goals are changing and those priorities are changing, the makeup of your board should change. That's why the graceful exit is so important. And that is why you want to have a time frame around that goal for the board, because you want to refresh it, reassess it, and sometimes change the board 100%. And that board member should know that you're going to be changing the board as the goals change. That board member should not think they're there for life. You may have them there for life along the way, but they're there for one moment in time to help you with one goal, and that may be their only tenure with you. Now, the first question, so the second one was more around, should you change your board? The first question, read that one to me again.
How long should you
How
ask a board
long the
member to
tenure?
serve?
Yeah, this will depend on your goal. But typically 3, 6, 9, 12 months are really logical increments. But it will depend on the goal. If you have a goal to be on a path to CEO, you might assemble a board for a whole 12-month period of time to help you put plans in place to progress your experiences towards a 10-year path to CEO. But if your goal is more around, I want to work on my executive presence, you might assemble a board for 3 months with some very targeted exercises and advice and experiences. And that might just be a little 3-month tenure together. And for financial acumen, that may be a 6-month board because you're trying to lower your debt and increase your knowledge of investments. And that might be a 6-month tenure. But defining the tenure is really important to put that formal structure around it. So I'm glad you asked it because it's really important to get timing specified.
Right. And Donna, we
Yeah.
are just about out of time, and I want to give
Okay.
Heather a few moments to tell everyone
You
what's
got it.
coming next for Business Over Breakfast. So thank you so much. I hope that you've had a chance to see some of the love pouring in from the chat about always great insights from you.
Wonderful.
So practical and actionable. So thank you for being with us today. Heather, over to you.
Thank you so much, Pam, for your artful facilitation as always. And Donna, thank you so much for sharing your time and really for
Wonderful.
helping us think differently today. I appreciate that. So my name is Heather Dufault. I am part of the open enrollment team at the Goizueta Business School, and I appreciate all of you for sharing your morning with us. I did want to just take a few minutes to share what's coming up in our Business Over Breakfast series. You can see on the screen on August 1st, we are going to talk about how to make the most of the in-between times of your career with Monique LaRue Wilson. And then on August 15th, we're going to talk about unlocking team results by redesigning collaboration with Scott Sanchez and Robert Ferris. All right, and so finally, I'm happy to share some information on a few of our upcoming open enrollment programs. Pam mentioned this briefly early on, the Goizueta Executive Women's Leadership Program. This is a 2-month hybrid immersive development program that will run later this fall in September and October. And you'll find some more information about this and the other programs I'm going to speak about here in the chat before you go. Next up, we've got our Executive Communication and Leadership Presence course. That's in October. Negotiating Strategy for Success, also in October. And then finally, Disrupting Your Business Strategy. This one will be in November. So again, thank you so much for joining us today. You should find information, additional information about today's session and these upcoming short courses in the chat. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us. And we so very much appreciate you joining us today. We hope that we will see you soon.